Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/ProRevenge. In today's episode, Military Revenge Story. The results of my yard work. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Military Revenge Story. Military Revenge Story. My first post, please be nice. This was back in 2013 when I was based in Holland, British Marine for context. I had been married to my wife for a little over 18 months when I deployed to Afghanistan. My wife had a job in the British delegation on base and got to know pretty much every Brit and their husband/wife. One day we were directly targeted by a vehicle-borne IED. Now, whilst it wasn't uncommon for there to be a threat to coalition forces in general, being directly targeted felt more personal for obvious reasons. That was also the day I found out about an RAF guy back in Holland had tried it on with my wife. I found him on Facebook and, still feeling rather raw about Terry trying to blow me up, messaged him words to the effect of, "If you go near Mrs. Von_Scranhammer again, I will put glass in your throat the next time I see you." The next day one of my bosses, who is also RAF, messaged me on Facebook to say that this guy has been over to his office and basically tattled on me. He gave me a friendly warning/heads up that this guy could have gone to the MPs and reported me. I have no idea what would have happened, but L acknowledged the warning and said it won't happen again. My boss had my back and actually told him to wind his neck. Fast forward to when L got back from Afghan. A few days had passed and I was starting to settle into a normal life again. My wife brought it up, after explaining she didn't mention it at the time due to my reaction the first time, that an Army Sergeant Major had tried to message her via Facebook. He told her she was beautiful and wanted her number. She promptly blocked him. I was pissed off to say the least, but I understand why she kept it until I was back on home soil. The next day I went into our department and spoke to my other boss, an Army captain. I told him what had happened and he said, "Leave it with me." He basically had a chat with him and nothing came of it. I felt deflated and even more pissed off. That was until our senior military officer came into our department. He welcomed me back and asked how my tour was. Still pissed off, L said, "It was good, sir. With the exception of Sergeant Major Douchebag trying to get round my wife." He was, understandably, a little taken aback. About an hour or so later he emailed me saying that he feels the need to do something official about this. Something I had forgotten was that the colonel and sergeant major belonged to the same regiment, so having one of his own behave like this had clearly gripped him. I told him the full story and provided screenshots of what Sergeant Major Douchebag had said to Mrs. Von_Scranhammer. For this to go official, my wife had to provide a statement. Unfortunately, Mrs. Von_Scranhammer is very non-confrontational and said she didn't want this to continue. I respected her wishes of not wanting to provide a statement, but hatched a plan that would be 3 years in the making. The timing is important. I emailed the colonel and said that Mrs. Von_Scranhammer has declined. However, I felt the need for some formal recognition, so L asked that Sergeant Major Douchebag write a letter of apology, addressed to both my wife and L, which is to be signed and dated. This was granted and I received said letter 2 days later. It said, "Lance Corporal and Mrs. Von_Scranhammer. I am writing this letter to you both to apologize for the torment and anxiety that you both must have felt from the messages that you received from my Facebook account. To Mrs. Von_Scranhammer. Nobody should ever be in a situation where they worry about going to work because of who may come through the door, especially so, when they have the added stress of a partner being operationally deployed at the time. The anguish that you must have felt at this time is immeasurable, and for this, I apologize. To Lance Corporal Von_Scranhammer. Being operationally deployed is stressful enough without the added stress and worry about family back home. Support from home and loved ones is what carries many people through tough times whilst on tour. For any undue angst caused, I apologize. I regret any hurt and anguish caused by this issue and apologize, wholeheartedly and unreservedly to you both. Signed. SGT Maj Douchebag. Position held. I now waited. I saw her the rest of my time in Holland, moved back to the UK to my new base and waited some more. Almost 3 years after I received the apology letter, I looked up Sergeant Major Douchebag's wife on Facebook. I had known the whole time we were out there that he was married, his wife lived back in the UK, and he has routinely tried to cheat on her. I sent her the same screenshot which I had sent to the colonel. I also, before leaving Holland, printed off the emails between the colonel and myself where I requested the apology letter. I blanked out the colonel's details and sent the pictures of that. And then, lastly, I sent a picture of the apology letter, signed and dated by her husband admitting what he had done. Once Elle saw she had read it, Elle blocked her, blocked Sergeant Major Douchebag, and all his friends who had also been out in Holland at the same time. Why 3 years? I remember him saying, before he turned into a douchebag and tried it on with my wife, that he only had 3 years left to serve. If my timing was correct, he was months away for completing his 22 years and receiving a very nice pension. If his wife decided to go ahead with divorce, she would take half of said pension, which would essentially *CK him over for the rest of his life. The results of my yard work. I posted this in another subreddit, but it was suggested I also try it here. So here it is. First, let me say that I am not 100% certain this is ProRevenge, because I don't necessarily think of myself in that league. I live in a consolidated county. That means that the city and county governments merged some years back, ostensibly to reduce administrative and infrastructure costs. This is important because services like fire, police, utilities, and trash pickup are now managed by former county officials, and not the city officials. Many of these services are also much more inefficient, and some services have been outsourced to private companies. My municipality outsourced trash and yard waste pickup a few years ago, and the two companies who now do those collections are woefully inadequate, and their services cost more than when the city or county did it. They both have similar sets of rules: what can be put out for collection, take fewer types of waste away, and no longer come 2 days a week as the city once did, but now only come 1 day a week. We're all paying more money for less service. Now that the background is done, here's the story. I did some yard work over the course of a couple of weekends last summer, cutting some limbs, trimming some shrubbery, and cutting down a dead tree in my backyard. Knowing what the rules are for how much yard waste, limbs, leaves, and such can be put out, I bagged everything that was supposed to be bagged, filling up 3 of them. Things like leaves and small clippings, weeds, and such. The paper bags for yard waste from the big box home improvement stores are what they require, so I use those. I just fill them halfway up so as to not make them too heavy for the waste collectors, even though there are no written weight restrictions. However, if a bag is too full, they will knock it over to spill out the contents, so they then don't have to pick it up. I cut the larger limbs down to under 4 feet in length, or they wouldn't be picked up. Anything at all they can do to get out of picking something up, they will do. And they almost always leave a horrendous mess behind when they do pick things up. The pile put out for collection is not allowed to be any wider than 10 feet, nor any deeper or higher than 5 feet, nor may it contain any piece longer than 4 feet. All bags must be placed in a row, no more than 3 feet away from the limb pile. My pile was maybe 4 inches longer than the 10 feet, and only because of the tiny ends of the limbs, smaller than a toothpick, hanging out of the pile. The pile was no higher than 3 feet, and no deeper than 4 feet. In other words, it fell within the size limits, except for a few twigs with leaves. I also had the 3 bags, each about half full of clippings and leaves, all lined up exactly as required, and about 2 feet away from the main pile. They were scheduled to come on a Tuesday, but when I got home from work that afternoon, it was all still there. There was a pre-printed notice on my door that my pickup exceeded the prescribed size limits, and the note said that I would be required to either pay a $250 oversized load fee, or reduce the size of the pile by half to make it fit into the limit. This is where the revenge comes in. I had the next 2 days off, so the next morning, bright and early, I got out the hedge trimmers. I trimmed the ends of the pile back to exactly 9 feet in length. After carefully laying those trimmed bits on top of the pile, I went to the backyard, where the limbs I had not trimmed up the week before were stacked for the following week's pile, and found 4 long, fairly straight limbs. I removed all the smaller limbs and leaves from these limbs, ending up with 4 moderately straight poles, each about 7 feet long. I marked 1-foot intervals on each pole in fluorescent orange paint, and stuck them in the ground, out at the curb in the front yard, at the corners of a rectangle exactly 5 feet wide and 10 feet long. Got out the surveyor's tape, bright pink plastic tape used to mark property corners, and tied it onto and around the stakes at the height of 5 feet. This established a visual outline of the volume I was required to stay within. I made absolutely sure that everything in the pile was completely inside the poles and below 5 feet in height. This required adding almost 2/3 of the remaining pile in the backyard to the stack out front, to bring it up to 4 feet 6 inches in width, 4 feet 6 inches in depth, and 9 feet 6 inches in length. And no pieces longer than 46 inches. The pile was almost twice as much material as before. This included some small logs, up to 4 inch in diameter, also each 46 long. The limit is 5-inch diameter, all within the limits of 5 feet by 5 feet by 10 feet the waste company mandates. I carried each of the 3 bags of clippings to the backyard and filled each of them up as much as possible, while still being able to fold over the tops and staple shut each bag. I also included small, 8-inch to 10 sections of the ends of larger limbs for added weight. The bags were now completely filled, and weighed more than twice what they had before. I had to use the hand truck to get them out to the curb, they were so heavy. Oh, and all the extra clippings I had generated filled up 2 more bags, so the total was now 5 bags. The company limit. I then went inside, called the company, and very nicely asked that they come to pick up my yard waste, since they had not done so on Tuesday. They agreed to send out a truck and crew, and told me I would have to pay the fee. Come on then, I told them. They soon arrived, and happened to be the same crew that normally comes to my neighborhood. I pulled a 25-foot Stanley tape measure from my pocket, and asked them to measure the poles, to confirm that the space was within the required limits. They did so, and agreed the pile was not oversized, and proceeded to spend the next 2 hours manually loading it all onto their truck. Oh, and it took both of them to manhandle each of those bags into the back of the truck too. I told them, very nicely and with a smile, that I knew what 10 feet was, pointed to the fence where it was marked with orange electrical tape, and thanked them for coming to pick up my yard waste. The 2 tired, sweaty waste disposal guys just groaned, got in their truck, and drove off. There was no extra fee added to my bill for that month. Never has been since. Now, I know they got paid for their time, and I know that I had to do a lot of extra work on my day off, but since last July, I have not once ever had them leave so much as a single leaf on the ground in front of my house. They had to actually do some hard work, with me standing there in shorts, smiling and drinking cold Gatorade while they were sweating.